Oh wait, not to my computer. Okay, well, whatever. This will record to my computer and then I'll upload it. I meant to record to the cloud, but I pushed the wrong button.
Thank you, Megan.
Um,
Real quick before we get into the icebreaker, I want to say one of my goals for this, the prompt was, what is one thing you don't know a lot about but would like to learn more about, essentially? One of my goals for this icebreaker is to source ideas for us to all give lightning talks to each other. So I would encourage you developers to pick something you don't know so you can study it. But also us mentors can give talks about anything you want us to talk about. So just let us know. And I'll be right back. So sorry.
nice. Yeah, does anybody have any thoughts that they want to share? Or I can go first if y'all need a second to think about. EJ and I yesterday were talking about web components, the like native web components that are built into like browsers. And I don't really know how they work. And I think it would be cool to learn because it gives you the ability to make components to like think about your app or your website like in components the way that you would with React, but you're just using vanilla JavaScript. And I think that seems pretty nifty. And I know EJ knows things about it. Let's see. Who has another one that they want to share?
Um, I thought of something I could go.
Yeah, go for it.
Sure. I I think I would like to learn specifically. I think the prompt was mentioning web design. In terms of web design, I would love to learn more about web development. I'd want to learn more about responsive design. I mean, I've worked a little bit with like media queries and setting up breakpoints to get things to resize, but I think I have a tendency to use like fixed units when I'm sizing things. And I feel like the end goal is more like using relative units so that you don't have to rely fully on breakpoints. Your page is dynamically growing and shrinking. And then just like the use of like grids, flexbox, stuff like that to really utilize, you know, different, like a dynamically sized page, I guess. So any tips on that would be great. And I will well, actually, I'll just ask if anyone else has anything.
I can go next. So
Okay.
the question is what we want to learn about or what we have learned about? Or we don't know about. Oh, well, I can talk about what I guess I've been learning about recently. On my work, we're moving the front end to Next.js, which is this like React framework. And we're also starting to use something called Storybook. I don't know if you guys have heard of that. It's like this thing that it's like a playground kind of thing where you can install it to your front end, and basically it's a way to create components that are like you create components for like every situation. So for like example, if you want to create a button, like a button of different sizes, is there a Josh website? Oh, so let's say like you're working with your designer and they want to create like multiple versions of the same component. I think it's a playground kind of thing where you could like work together to come up with a component outside of your app. So like independent of your app, where you can just test out a bunch of different UIs and like different sizes, different colors, whatever, without actually needing to like import them into your app. So we've been setting that up. Because we plan on onboarding a lot more engineers and designers. So I think we're just setting up like a good framework to use moving forward as we grow our team. Yeah. So if you want to check it out, it's pretty cool and it looks nice too. It's like easy to use as well. Okay, who else wants to go?
Yeah, adding more to Jenny's, I have used Next.js in one of my projects and I really liked it, especially the routing part. The more I would like to learn is about the email optimization that Next.js offers. So yeah, that's what my goal is, to learn Next.js and use it more and more of its features. Yeah. Thank you. And
Hi
I think
guys.
I would go with, I'm sorry?
Go ahead. I think were you calling on someone?
Oh yeah, we could go with Stacy.
Hi guys. I would have to say strengthening my backend skills. I'm not a huge fan of backend development. When I first came into software engineering, I came with the hopes just working in the front end. And so when I started Flatiron and they like started us off with Ruby and Rails, I was like, ugh, like so it's not my favorite, but then I do know that I need to work on my backend skills to strengthen that.
Do you have like a particular back end, like a particular part of the back end that you are interested? Like, is it databases or?
Yeah, would it have to be more like the server management, database, API, just in case, having the full stack belt,
Nice,
but it's
yeah.
not my favorite. It just isn't. I just like to see the beautification of the web page, like, things coming to life, that's what I enjoy seeing, but who knows? And my last mentor, he did say that if in case I would be surprised, maybe my next job would be in back end. This is where you don't like, this is where they might throw you in. So yes. I think, does Doorbell have to go?
Do I have to go? No, I'm just kidding. I'd have to agree with Stacy. And I would also add algorithms and how Big O analyzes their efficiency. But I know that that's a huge topic. So I was looking into possibly taking the Coursera course from Princeton. I think it's like algorithm part 1, part 2. So I know that's a massive topic. But there are times where I'm building something and I have no idea if it's going to be super expensive. So I think that's it. And I think EJ is the last person in case they want to go.
Hello, I am back at my desk, but now my monitors and keyboard stuff won't plug in. So I'm gonna have to restart my computer, which I was trying to avoid so hard actually leaving in case I dumped this whole meeting into the ether. But I would love to learn more about developer tooling and like how it's made. So tooling that helps us do our job as developers is often made in a language called Rust these days. And I want to learn Rust as a way of like going more systems level stuff because I don't really know a lot of system level languages. But in web development, I've been learning more about some server stuff, some like concepts for streaming and backend things that I think are interesting. But I still prefer to be on the front end most of the time. I also want to say, I heard Jenny talk about Storybook, and one cool thing about that is you can actually use Storybook stories as a source for tests. So remember how we had to sketch the UI for our tests? You can feed Storybook stories, as in the little encapsulated ideas of your components into tests, and then just use those as a source of truth, which is really nice. Check it out; it's very cool, very fun. Okay, I'm gonna actually like shut everything down and come back. So please feel free to start with demos, and I'll be back as soon as I can. And hopefully, this meeting does not end the meeting for everyone. Everyone, cross your fingers. I'll be right back.
Suspense. All right.
Okay, we're good.
We made it. Okay, let's go ahead. Let's just do them in order. Let's start with issue number 8.
Sure.
Let's see. Who was this?
That is-
Stacy and Nick.
That's right. So let's see. I'm just okay. Gonna share this screen. Sorry, just get set up 1 second. Are we looking at the presentation?
Yeah.
Go to presentation view. That would be helpful.
Yeah.
Also, I like your trees in the background. It's very
Oh,
soothing.
yeah. Let's try and do the most like non-distracting background. Okay. All right. So Stacy's gonna start us off.
Right. Let's see. I think it has a delay. Okay, here we go. So we had issue number 8 with Nick and myself, and I think it has a little delay with when it runs. There we go. So we were tasked with creating a welcome prompt, and we were instructed to help guide the users of how the app works. What we did, we implemented a prompt that orients first-time users and guides them through adding items. We also configured the prompt to present a different message for users based on whether they already do have items and if in case they want to add more items to the list. is there one? And restructured, and well, we did change that this morning. Well, we did change that, but we did structure an add additional items button on the list page, which navigates users to the manage shopping list page where they're able to add more items through that list. And Nick is going to show you the demo.
Okay, great. So the steps for testing this is going to be signing in using your email. Click on the empty list and navigate to the list view. You should see the prompt to get started. Click the add item. It will actually, now it'll say click add item below rather than it being a button. It's a link. You will also see a list item that says no items found along with a add item link. Click the link to ensure that you are navigated to the manage list view. Start from home. And so this is now, that was testing criteria for an empty list. Now this is if you have a list that already has items. Start from home, click on your non-empty list and navigate to list view. Now you should see a different prompt, add additional items on the manage list page. The text managed list, which now does not have the slash, should be clickable and navigate you to the manage list view. Okay, and so here's our before. You can see we have a generic message that's regardless of your list size, when you come in, it's just going to say hello from the list page. And what we did is we added this dynamic message that's going to check the length. And then based on that, it's going to use this ternary operator to say, either add additional items if there are items in the list, or it's going to say to get started. And just a few details on this button, you can see that the first paragraph has a button embedded in it. It's actually now going to be a nav link that's embedded in there. And this is also part of the after. This is at the bottom. Now we have a nav. This is actually a nav link that's added to the default empty list LI. So if there's nothing in your list, you'll see no items found with a little link that says add items, basically. So, okay, so now we are in the demo portion. I am going to just pull up, let's see. Sorry, 1 second. Oh no, did I close it? All right, no, I got it. So we've got it right here. Okay, so let's start with an empty list. I believe holiday is empty, or maybe, let's see. Yes, so to get started, click the add item button below. So we have this, this text should be updated. I don't think I've re-rendered the page since I just merged a second ago, but this will say, hold on 1 second. Sorry about this. Let's see, is that gonna, oh, that's not what you want to see at a presentation.
Have you run npm install? Because I think the other team merged, there's like a new package.
Okay. All right. So I will do that after the presentation, but I'll just show.
I think your deploy preview link should also still be up.
Right. Okay, let's go through that. So if we come to here, I've got the deploy preview link, pull that into this window. Okay, so now if we click on holiday and we go to list, we can add item here, which brings you to this page. And then also if we come to a list that already has items, we see we have this manage list link, which is going to bring us also to the list. And if we're in a list that has items, say we say, oh, I want Cocoa Puffs, we get the no items found message with the link that can take us to add that item if we so choose. Okay, so that is our demo, and then we're taking questions if we have any.
I saw that there was some comments and suggestions on this PR, like while you were reviewing it, like while Shiveksha and Doribel were reviewing it. Was there anything left from that you wanted to talk about, or anything that you wanted to highlight?
Yeah, so there were a few things that we thought were good suggestions that we did not implement just because we wanted to avoid scope creep, and we figured it might be something that we want to implement across the application at some point. I thought a really good suggestion from Shubeksha was currently when you go into a list, you don't see the name of that list. So there's not a lot of information to let you know that you have like what list you're even looking at. So we could potentially either create state for that and then pass it into the list. There's a lot of ways you could handle that. You could get it from local storage and then just like cut off the unique identifier and just take the list name. But in any case, I thought that was a great suggestion. We didn't implement it just because we didn't want to go beyond the scope of the PR. But I think that's something that we should definitely do.
Nice. Yeah, I feel like we should open an issue that's just like, here's all of the design like things that we're thinking about as we go through all of these other tickets, so that then when you get to those final weeks, you'll be like, oh yeah, there's all this stuff we wanted to do.
Right. Mm-hmm.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Nice job.
Thank you.
That looks really good.
All right, next up, we got issue number 9, Doribel and Shubeksha.
Go ahead and share my screen. Let's figure it. And person mode.
So hello, this is Shubeksha and Doribel presenting issue number 9. So issue number 9 is to allow a user to mark their item as purchased and track them with items they needed to buy with 24-hour purchase frequency implementation. For the database changes, we added a logic to increase total purchases count when an item is marked purchased, and so we can track how many times it has been bought. We also implemented a last date purchase that enforces 24-hour purchase window, ensuring that user can't repurchase the same item within a day by automatically unchecking the item after 24 hours. And for the UI changes, we introduced a semantic label that toggles between purchased and unpurchased, indicating that current item status. Also, we also added last purchase date that is displayed adjacent to the purchase and unpurchased status, including date and time, to help user track their recent purchases. Lastly, we added auto refresh function using use effect to update the UI with the latest data on the compound mount. So moving on, I'm handing over to Doribel.
Hey everybody, thank you. So in terms of the code, we made quite a few changes. The files we modified were firebase.js, toggle.jsx, list.jsx, listitem.jsx. And we're going to go ahead and move on to the code. So first, we're going to look at Firebase. So for the Firebase file, we added the update item function so that the items in Firestores are updated, and it accepts a list path, item ID, total purchases, and date last purchase as parameters. Then let me make this bigger. Then we have list.jsx, and in this file, we updated the list component to pass total purchases, item ID, list path, and date last purchase as props to the list item components. Then we added a new component, toggle.jsx, and this toggle component is responsible for handling the checkbox state. And that includes user confirmation purchases, and it also uses conditional messaging to disable states. And we are going to talk about the said message later on, because you probably noticed when testing that you did not receive a message stating that you can click repurchase an item prior to 24 hours. And then in list item, we did import use toggle. So we did download and use toggle. And this is from ui.dev/use hooks. And we use this to manage purchase state. And we implemented list item to handle item updates through the update item function. And we also automatically disabled and re-enabled the checkbox based on the date last purchase expiration, which in this case is 24 hours. And I did leave the dates.js file, which we're going to talk about at the end after the presentation. So now for the live demo. So first, I'm going to sign in. Okay, and oh no, this usually doesn't happen. I guess today is full of surprises. So then we're going to navigate to, for example, I believe test list has some unpurchased items. So as you can see, mangoes and first item were purchased yesterday. So it hasn't yet been 24 hours. Oh, and in order for us to test the time, we changed the expiration date to 5 minutes, we actually used 5 minutes, 10 minutes, just to ensure that it was working. So I can't, right now when I click on purchase item, we do not receive a message stating that we need to wait 24 hours. So that's something that we need to fix. But if I click here on hot dog, it says, would you like to confirm the purchase? Yes. Hot dog is purchased successfully. And then when I try to click on it again, it does not allow me to click. And I believe that is it. And questions and suggestions are welcome. So 1 billion years later, this is in honor of all the hours we worked on this.
Yeah.
It was great, but it was probably close to 1 billion years. And so before, I would love to hear questions and suggestions, but what I want to go back to some of the areas where we struggled. So we have a dates.js file, and it has a get future date function. So in our list item component, we try to use this function to help us calculate the 24 hours, or to how do I say this, to calculate a certain date of days in the future. So in this case would be 24 hours. But when we tried using it, it didn't work. And the other part in my notes, yes, I already talked about in toggle, this set message is not working. So what we wanted is to have something that says, hey, checkbox is disabled for this item. Purchase action is blocked. Actually, we wanted to change this, but something kinder, like please wait 24 hours to do purchase, something like that. So, and one last thing that we learned is the reason why it wasn't working, because we're like, why isn't it working? And maybe Subeksha, you may want to jump in and explain too, is that you can't, when you have the disabled logic in here, we cannot have a message will not run. So you need to have something outside of the input in order for a message to run. So we tried creating a div and incorporating on click like separately so that it would run, but that didn't work. And then we tried a set message. I think that's it. Thank you.
Can you explain that last part again? So it wouldn't, if it's disabled, then a screen reader doesn't announce it, or what doesn't
if it's
read out the
disabled, there's
message?
absolutely no way for the code to show in the UI a message, any type of message. So even if it's an alert, so an alert wouldn't run, set message wouldn't run. It has to be something outside.
Interesting.
In this case of the input. So which is why we added below label this little code.
And even that message is not working.
EJ, I see
Alert
you have your
message.
hand up.
How are you?
So as you already deduced, Storybell, if an element is disabled with that attribute, it just won't. You can't have user interactions happen to it. You can't click on it. You can't tab to it. You can't do anything to it. So none of the code that just runs on click or on key down whatever will actually ever work. So the question becomes, do you want this to be disabled or not? If you want to run a message explaining why the user can't do something, then maybe it shouldn't be disabled in the first place.
Mm.
We found, yeah, that's a great point. We found something on Stack Overflow that said that in this case, we do want it to be disabled, right? Because we don't want the user to be able to check that box repurchase prior to, for this issue 24 hours. But we also want to be able to communicate what's happening so they don't think that there's something wrong with their
Right.
So
So the thing is that you still can't use the disabled attribute to do that, because as you learned, you won't be able to register any click events on that thing. So my question to you is, and this, again, this work is great. You did a great job. I think what you have here is totally fine. But if you wanted to refine this, how would you allow the user to click key down whatever on that checkbox, but make sure you don't get the check behavior you don't want? You can do that.
Mm-hmm.
Because the thing is, no matter what you're going for, you can't have that disabled attribute on there if you want the user to be able to click and get feedback. Does that make sense? We don't need to solve that question now, but just something to think about. How would you allow the click event to happen, but then maybe respond to, okay, they've clicked, but what are the conditions here? Have we checked within the last 24 hours? Can we stop that from happening? Does that make sense?
Mm.
Also, one other thing to maybe think about, I'm just reading over the issue, but it does say we assume the user does not need to buy the item again for at least another day. But we're assuming that, like maybe the user is going to buy it within a day, right? So in that case, like you could leave the checkbox. You could allow the user to uncheck it and then check it off again if they do need to buy it again. So just another way of looking at the tasks where we kind of don't need to worry about this whole issue.
I agree, Jenny, but it was the task was so that it would be a 24-hour window. But I agree, you should be able to, as a user, to purchase however many mangoes you want.
One thing I'll say about this too is that a lot of these decisions that are kind of written in the issues are like product assumptions that we're going for to get our first version of this out. And we can always change those product understandings as we talk to our users, as we talk about our product goals. But we picked an assumption sort of to give you a boundary in which to work for the issue, rather than like saying this is how it has to be forever. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
Great work. I want to go back to the first demo because I didn't want to interrupt when I came in the middle, but I saw some discussion about the ARIA label being applied to that manage list button. Megan, I believe that was you that brought that up in one of your PR comments. And I want to just add in case it helps for the future. Generally, if you get a name from contents like the text manage list, you don't really want to apply an ARIA label on something because the text that's there is usually going to be enough and be helpful for giving the user information that they want. It can be a bit annoying if you are both low vision as in like you can see and you're using screen reader to be like, oh, the text says something, but I hear it saying something else to me in my screen reader. Why is that happening? It can be very confusing.
Sure.
So you generally want to avoid that and just kind of assume that as long as there is a label from contents, that will be helpful enough. And of course, if you get feedback that it isn't, then you can change it. But you want to try to avoid adding too much overdone spackle on top of this house metaphor that I'm hastily constructing in my head. But does that make sense?
Yes. Yeah. And so now I can see the difference between the previous situation that we applied the ARIA label. It was for a button that didn't have any semantic information, right? It was like an X essentially, which is why we wanted to label it, versus a button that does have contents that are descriptive.
Yes, exactly. Another example in reverse would be maybe you have a button that has an image inside of it for extra information, like a download button that has a little image of PDF. You want to make sure that image is hidden from users because it's only really decorative. So you want them to hear the word download, but not hear like download image because that doesn't make any sense, right? So there are cases where you do want to change what appears to be the content, but generally you start with the content by itself is correct, and you learn from your users whether it's helpful or not.
Right.
That's my soapbox for the day. So next on the agenda, I'll borrow the conch from Megan for a second. We have technically, we've scheduled a presentation on agile ways of working, and that the slideshow is cool, and we're happy to give it to you. But I also wanted to present the idea that maybe we could use this time to just talk about this week's issue. Dory Bell, since you both work so hard on this, or we can talk about the slideshow and go over that as a team. But I thought that since there was some really hard work done this week, it'd be cool to talk about it as a group and maybe talk about what we've learned or what we can do differently in the future. It's up to all of you. Also, one more thing in case it helps, the slideshow is very short, and it's something that I think you could all read just fine on your own if you prefer to. But if you want to spend time on your own doing it, that again, we're happy to present this slide deck to you. Go ahead. Sorry.
I had a question about the commit, actually committing the commit message. So I remember that Megan had shown us that if you incorporate feature, and then the hashtag issue 9, it connects it right to the issue. But do we have to do that in every commit or just the first time? We have to write the feet. It sounds like I'm saying feet, but you know what I mean.
I think it might be less about the feet and the issue number, I think, are two different things. Like, I'm pretty sure you can put the like pound issue number anywhere in your commit message and it will find it. The feet that's just like a convention. What is it? Conventional commit. That's just a way to be like, what kind of commit was this? Kind of like, were you the one that shared the PR review? They had like conventional comments, just so that you know what kind of comment it is. It's like that, but for your commits.
Okay, so you don't have to do it every single time you commit, like every message. You can do it just the first time.
I guess it depends. I do it every time, just so that all of the commits show up. But you can, I guess, for once you merge it to main, the important ones are like once you merge it to main, the commit message on the squash and merge, because that's like once you squash and merge all of your changes back onto the main branch, that's the only commit message you'll really see anyway. I don't know. Do folks have other thoughts?
I believe, Megan, you might know if I'm actually wrong about this, but I believe as long as you do that reference once in one commit that goes into the branch, depending on how you merge, because not all merge strategies involve squashing. And so what squashing is like you take all let's say you make 20 commits on a feature branch you're working on with your partner. If you squash, it gets turned into exactly one commit that goes into the main history so that it's not polluted with all the little things you did. In my case, I'm very messy when I'm working by myself, so I'll like write a lot of little commits that say nonsense things sometimes, as much as I try to be very careful. But I don't want the main branch and everyone else's code to be polluted with messages like, gosh, why isn't this working? Sad face. So like, but squashing allows you to kind of tidy up that history and button it up into one single commit that's a bit long. So as long as that makes it into whether you're doing it this way, that way, or the way that we're doing it here, as long as at least one of those messages has the number in it, the #9 or whatever in it, it'll work. Additionally, if you would prefer not to do it in your commits, because maybe it's hard to remember to do it that way, you can also do it in GitHub itself. As long as you reference on GitHub in your PRs, you can reference the issue and close them that way. It's really up to you and like whatever norms of working your team establishes.
Thank you. And then just to go back to what you were asking, EJ, I would love, we don't have to go over each slide, but I would like to see if maybe we can open it up. And I know it's about Agile, what is it again? Agile something. And just see if you have any feedback, like because I know I can read it, but I'm not sure like what that looks like in your day-to-day. So maybe you all can talk about your experiences with, intro to
Maybe this can be us talking about how we work on our teams, and then you can read the presentation, and maybe during office hours we can talk about more questions you might have. How does that sound?
Yeah, sounds good.
So I've been working as a software engineer for the last billion years, to go back to the image Dory Bell showed us. but I still don't like think of my ways of working as being agile or something else. I know what agile is if you ask me if I have to like think about it, but I just do my job, you know. So I don't know what agile is. At this point, I'm afraid to afraid to ask. So I'm going to look up the definition that they give, unless Megan, you have it up already and you want to read it out for us. You just posted the link and I've already lost it.
I do, but then I switched tabs. Where did it go? Agile is a framework within which complex, often large-scale products in complex environments are developed.
Helpful. So
Yeah.
so great. I know exactly what agile is now. I
My
think
understanding,
go
sorry
ahead.
to interrupt.
Please,
My
please.
understanding is that like in the past, they used to do what's called waterfall development, where you would have big projects that like would get delivered, the final software would get delivered to customers on like a CD or a floppy disk. And so at that point, if you couldn't make updates to your code very easily. So the process that it would go through was you would start out and you would do all of your design up front, and then you would do all of your development, and then you would do all of your testing. And so your project would sort of waterfall through those different stages, and then it would get sent to the customers. And if you needed to do an update, it's kind of like, well, too bad. Like, how are you going to get all those CDs back? And so the idea behind Agile was to have a tighter feedback loop so that instead of doing all of your design and all of your development and all of your testing, you broke it up into smaller cycles. So you would do like just as much design to get your MVP, your minimum viable product, and then you would develop just that, and then you would test just that, and then you would release that to your users and get feedback, and then you could iterate. So that's my understanding of where Agile started. And then, you know, now there's all of these other like buzzwordy things like Scrum or extreme programming. There's all of it's sort of like branched out into all of these different ways, but that was the original goal. There was this like Agile manifesto doc that a bunch of like developers sat in a room and came up with one weekend or something like that. Oh yeah, that's linked in here. The Agile manifesto. And so that talks about some of the original ideas behind why they wanted to build their software like this. Like, what were they frustrated about with the waterfall process, and what did they want to do instead?
That was way
That's
better
my-
than I would ever have explained anything, Megan. Thank you so much.
My first developer job was at a company called ThoughtWorks, and a lot of the people who helped write this Agile manifesto were there or like had been
Oh,
there
so
at
you
one
read on. You're
point.
right.
So it was
who were in
like,
ground zero. So
yeah, they indoctrinated us, but I like it.
I can give maybe like a real world comparison between agile ways of working and waterfall ways of working. If I don't know who here has ever played video games or enjoys video games, but if you think about the traditional release of video games, they had to be completely developed and done and on those floppy disks before any user ever got to them. Whereas web services can be released in chunks these days because you can update parts of the UI, you can test parts of things, you can do parts of the product and slices of them and things like that. But some things have to kind of be released all at once, and it's like good luck to you, you know. And so waterfalls are often the only way to do that for services like that can't be updated piecemeal. So it's kind of hard to envision any other way because the web is more flexible than other avenues like video game development. But I have lots of friends who work in game dev, and I hear horror stories about getting everything perfect and as good as possible because you can't go back, basically. Or you can now because you can download updates or for most modern video games, but like back in the days when you had to have cartridges that were on someone's Game Boy, it's like that's good luck to you, you know? You can't fix it after it's launched.
Right. Mhm.
The next, go ahead.
Sorry, go ahead, EJ.
No, I'm just rambling. Go ahead, please.
I wonder, like, maybe like explaining how it might look in a real life experience might be helpful. At my current job, it's a free for all. We don't have anything, no process whatsoever. But at my previous job, it was a pretty big company. So like all the roles were defined, like each cycle of the product was defined. And I guess what that looked like at my last role, at least, basically we worked in like 6-week cycles. So like the team, developers, the designers, I was a tech writer at that point. So we would all work in like 6-week sprints to work on a select number of features. And then at the end of that time, we would push it, like it would go live. And then we would start working on the next cycle. So yeah, usually these periods are pretty short. You have like a chunk of work that you plan on finishing within that time frame. And I think usually the product manager like gets feedback from customers and like is planning on what to work on next. So like when you work in Agile, the benefit is that the feedback loop is pretty short as well. So you're getting immediate feedback on what is working, what is not, like what needs to be worked on next, like maybe what customers are asking for next. So you're able to like adapt and adjust pretty quickly and like pass that to your development team so that they know what they will be working on next. Does that make sense? Or does that paint a better picture of how it might look?
Yeah. And Jenny, now you're talking about these cycles. Is this similar to the concept of a sprint where you're like,
Yeah, it's the same thing.
okay. Alright.
So usually like if you're at a well-organized company, like you sit down with your PMs and you kind of outline what you're planning, what features you're planning on working on, and then that gets broken down into tasks, kind of like what you guys are working on now, like issues or tasks, with like an estimate of how long it will take. And yeah, like your sprints are planned out in that way. So kind of pretty similar. Maybe this whole program could be considered one sprint, one longer sprint. Yeah,
I would say,
usually it's like 10
No, go
weeks.
ahead.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's a bit. I guess that's maybe a little bit long for a sprint. I don't know. It really depends on the company, like, and how things are structured.
yeah, I would say based on like the cycles of the teams that I've worked on in the past, I would say that Collab Lab is made up of many sprints, because we're kind of operating on a 2-week sprint where it's, well, maybe it's, I don't know. For me, it was like a sprint goes from retro to retro. So it's like you spend your time building something, maybe building a couple somethings depending on how many tickets you get through, and then you reflect on how that was going. The structure is a little bit different for Collab Lab because you don't have to do any sort of analysis of the tickets, really. All of that has been scoped out for you ahead of time in the issues that already exist. But I can share my screen. I found some diagrams that I had made from a past job, just like
Of course you have diagrams,
documenting.
Megan.
I love a picture. I'm a visual learner. So this was like what the sprint life cycle looked like at that first dev job where they were very big on Agile. So we worked in like the implementation stage of every sprint was 2 weeks, where every day you would like have your stand-up meeting where you're talking about like what you worked on so far. You look at like what ticket you're assigned to and if you need to like swap pairs or anything. And then at the end of that 2 weeks, you have your retro to like look back and reflect on how it went and talk about that as a group. So this is sort of what we're doing now in Collab Lab, is these 2-week sprints. But on a bigger software project, like in a real world scenario where your work isn't all scoped out ahead of time, you can have planning that happens before your actual implementation. So for us, this looked like the triad sync, which was like the team leads. So like the tech lead and the project manager or the program manager meeting to talk about like what do we need to get done in this sprint, and picking which tickets, like which high level tasks needed to be done. And then there would be an iteration planning meeting where they would share that with the developers, and then the developers would get assigned to those tickets to do some more analysis to like investigate like what is it going to take to get these acceptance criteria met, and like do we need to break down any of these tickets into smaller chunks, and things like that. And then we would have a meeting which we called story time where everybody shares what they learned during the analysis phase, and then we would point the tickets to be like, how much effort do we think that it's going to take, so that then by the time that you get to your actual sprint implementation, then you've already got your list of tickets that should be well scoped, kind of like how they are for Collab Lab. and everybody knows roughly what they're going to be doing. And then, sorry, EJ, I see you have your hand up, but I got one more thing.
No, you're fine.
And then we would stagger the sprints so that like while you're doing the implementation for one sprint, you're also planning the next sprint. So it's like you work in 2-week chunks, but really each sprint is 4 weeks because there's like a little bit of overlap. I don't know if that makes this more confusing or less confusing. Yeah, EJ, did you want to add something?
Yeah. The only thing I want to say, which again may make this more or less confusing, is my understanding is a sprint is an agreed upon unit of work that your team sets out to do, which means it can be any length. And depending on how you want to slice this metaphorical cake, you could argue that our sprints are 1-week sprints. We've agreed to do this much work for a week, and our responsibilities in that week are doing those tickets. But as Megan said, on other teams you'd have more responsibility to plan, to estimate, to argue about points, and all those things. So the takeaway here, I think, is a sprint is an agreed upon unit of work at the cadence with which your team works, which can vary. So again, may or may not be helpful, but just know that like different teams have different ways of working, and you'll see these terms thrown around. And there's nothing wrong with asking for clarification about how your team does things at your first job. No one's going to blame you if you don't know all the jargon right away.
Mm-hmm.
And I want to also highlight something Megan said, which was that typically teams will be very careful to point things so that it's accurate and manageable within the time frame you're given. And the issue that Dory Bell worked on this week is an example of something that was not pointed correctly for the time that you had, and there was no way we could avoid that. But this is also a valuable experience, I think, because if you get something like that in the future, Dory Bell, you can be like, no, I can't do this week. There's no way in this single week this issue should be the size it is. It needs to be 3 issues or whatever else, so you can give that feedback. And again, we are sorry that happened to you, but there was no time for us to break it apart like we wanted to.
No, it's okay. I love working with Sueksha. I learned a lot. So.
I mean, we're glad that you had a great time, but again, it was not kosher of us to do it that way. But I'm glad that you now have this experience and you can say, don't do this to me ever again. Here's why. I had this moment in Collab, like I learned something. Don't ever do it to me again.
It's a good thing to talk about in job interviews.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm glad that it all worked out in a week, all those tasks.
Oh, you should be very proud of the stuff that you did this in considering the compression of time you had and also onboarding all that stuff. But in the future, you can get a ticket like this, and you can think, if you think to yourself, this is too much, you're probably right. You're probably exactly right. It's too much. And then you can be like, can we break this down into 3 issues? And here are the boundaries between these 3 issues. And then we give them to somebody else, or we wait until we have more time and things like that. Which reminds me also of another thing. I'm going to keep one more thing until we all leave here. Going back to the idea of agile working and like the tight feedback loops, one benefit of agile work is that typically you'll also be able to give feedback between cycles. So let's say you have a design from, let's say Megan, we give you a design from a designer, and you're like, actually, we can't do this design this way because this component doesn't exist in our code base. You can do that and then start this and then work with that in a quick manner rather than having it be decreed to you in a waterfall. It must happen that way. So as a developer in an agile system, you should be able to say, actually, we can't do it this way for this reason, and be able to iterate with designers on something else that does work and is possible at this moment in time. So I guess what I'm getting at is ideally, we all want you to end up with jobs where it's okay and safe to give feedback, because you can't do your job if you can't give feedback on what's reasonable for you or not.
Jenny, did you have something that you wanted to add?
I did. I think I forgot. So I
No worries.
did want to say like usually as like if you join a company as a junior developer, I think the work, at least in the beginning, might be scoped out for you pretty well. At least if you have a good like mentor, manager, or like team lead, like senior developers who do more of the planning. And like the 2-week planning before the sprint that Megan was talking about, like maybe you won't be too involved in that in the beginning. So I would say like, I don't know, at least for me as a junior developer, I think our focus is like just getting the work done on time rather than focusing on the planning and like the bigger picture of it. So at least for the maybe first 6 months to 1 year. So if you were worrying about that, maybe you weren't, like don't be. Like your job right now is to just like learn and be able to do the job you're hired for. But it is good to know obviously the process and how the team works, like in advance. So yeah, knowing about all this is important. Just maybe not something you need to worry about too. I'd say, yeah.
I will say
agree
that
with
for the
that.
first handful of story times, probably for the first like 6 months to a year, like Jenny was saying, it was like I would just kind of look around and see what everybody else was pointing at, and I'd be like, yeah, that sounds right. That
Yeah, it
seems
seems
legit.
right. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. I mean, everything Jenny said, I agree with. Also, you can always try to take on more responsibility of that kind of thing in the future. If you're like, I want to know more about how this sauce gets made. I want to sit in this meeting. I want to participate. But the main thing that will help you estimate how long things take is if you can start saying yes or no to thinking it's reasonable that you're given these 2 weeks to do this assignment or whatever. So as long as you can say, I think I can get this done in time, you'll start developing this like ability to guess how long it'll take you to do stuff, and then you can use that to help plan out people's time too. It's very helpful to sort of like slowly grow into knowing how long something takes and giving feedback. But as long as you can try to protect your own time and try to guess how long it'll take you to do something, you can get really far that way and be a very helpful collaborator with your team.
Also, always
It's like
give
what
yourself
EJ said.
a little more time. Sorry, always give yourself a little more time than you expect. You
Mm-hmm.
know, like get yourself control.
Yeah.
Learned that the hard way many times. Sorry, go ahead, Manny.
No, I was just gonna say it's like what EJ said a couple weeks ago about pattern matching. Like that gets easier with estimation as you get more experience and you have more tickets where you can be like, oh yeah, we had to do something with this database and it was a hot mess and it took us a million years. And so I think that this new database ticket is also going to take a million years.
One more thing I'll say about ways of working that I want to get across before we go into our issues, which by the way, Jenny, I want to leave time for your thing too, is in a good job, I would hope that you aren't expected to do a lot of work right away. You're given time to learn the systems in place, to meet people, to read the code base. Be on the lookout for teams that understand that and are like tell you if they tell you anything. Hopefully they tell you that you'll have time to get up to speed, get all your equipment set up, get all your meetings done, and you aren't expected to A, be coding in the first 2 weeks, maybe even longer, or B, be independent for a very long time, because learning new systems and new teams and new ways of working takes a long time for anybody, especially at the beginning of your career. Jane, what were you gonna say? I didn't want to cut you off
Oh,
there.
I don't think I was gonna say anything, but yeah, I agree with what you said. An ideal like junior dev friendly environment, like you do get proper onboarding, like you do have time to get familiar with the code base. Sometimes you just get thrown in and you just have to figure out yourself. That's like a high possibility as well. Ideally, there's like a proper onboarding because it is pretty intimidating. It's very like the first level, not to like scare you off. It's just part of any, I don't know, new job anywhere. But
I mean, I'm a senior engineer, and my manager had to be like, no, you're not allowed to write code for the first 2 weeks because there was a bug I wanted to fix with it on my first day, and I knew how to do it. And she was like, no, you're taking time to read stuff, you're taking time to breathe. You're not committing code for 2 weeks. I'm gonna fight you. She was very nice about it, but she was like, no, we're not doing that.
yeah, I didn't touch code for at least 2 weeks either. I just watched my mentor code for 2 weeks, and it drove me crazy a little, but it was better that way. I don't know. You have to learn how to do things first before you actually do it. Different ways of onboarding, I guess. I would have preferred to start typing things, start breaking things, but not my rules.
Yeah, I'm deeply impatient, but it's probably for the best that I was held back by the scruff of my neck. Any other questions before we move on to issue assignment?
Well, I'm just gonna say I'm happy we did go over this because for the longest while, I think I've been confusing the two with the framework and the workspace, Agile framework and the Agile workspace. At first, I was like, "What are they talking about? That doesn't sound like what I read." And then I started reading the slides, and I was like, "Oh, okay, that makes sense." But I never thought there was a framework. I always thought it was a workspace, the Agile workspace, being more like relaxed, maybe working from home and all of this other stuff. And then when Jenny did share her screen, I was like, oh, there's a whole new, other thing going on over here. Yeah, but I'm happy that we did go over that. So I, got to know the difference between the two.
I'm glad. Also in the slides, there's other jargon that gets defined, like Scrum, which is like a way of structuring teams rather than a way necessarily of doing work. We can go over that as a team on like office hours or even next week if we want to, but I do want to make sure we have time at least for issue assignment, because we're 3 minutes out from the end of meeting. So, oh gosh, I think I can do this. Okay, I'm gonna do it. I'm gonna share my screen. Thank you again, Megan, for hosting while I was indisposed.
Teamwork.
Okay, so I'm going over to our project brief. And wait.
Week 6, I think.
Week 6. Wow. Wow.
It's
Cool.
flying by.
We're on 10 and 11, y'all. Isn't that wild? Wait, hold on. Wait. Yes. Okay. Yes. Hi, I'm here. 5. We're picking week 5. We're going into week 6. I got there. I got there in the end. Our issues are number 10. As a user, I want to be alerted when I'm entering an empty item or an item that already exists in my list. Number 11. Ooh, this is another chunky one. So maybe if the pairs aren't quite right, then whoever didn't do the hard work last week should be involved in the harder work this week. Number 11, as an item, I want my estimated next purchase date to be computed at the time of my purchase so that the database can learn how often I buy different items. I'll go over this one first, even though it's out of order, just because it's got a bit more going on. The goal here is to ultimately be able to advise users about how often they purchase things and how often they should purchase something else again. And so we're going to be teaching the app how to learn more dates and do math to get to that point. And if we have more time, I'd go over this more, but there's lots of notes on how to do what. And again, we would be happy to help you if you do get stuck. And I've already forgotten which people had which. Go ahead, Jenny.
One thing I think my team was confused about this. I will say this task is pretty involved. Please be ready. But I think you need to install a package.
Yes.
Yes. So we were very confused about that. You need to find it and then install it to your project.
If it's not installed, it should have been, and that's on our that's on us. It should have been, but if it isn't, it's this one here.
It was not for us. Maybe that changed the class.
Oh wow. Okay. So I'll add a note when I create the pairing threads that you need to install this because it should have been, and that's a mistake maybe on our editing. But there is this package. I'll call that out when we start assigning issues. But I believe for number 11 we have Dory Bell and Stacy. So Dory Bell, are you ready to go back into the fire here? Do you want this? Do you not want this issue?
Can I switch with Nick, please?
How does that sound? You want to switch, or do you feel? It's up to you.
Nick, are you okay with that?
Totally fine. Yeah, however you want to do it.
Fair. Yes, I think that's fair. Nick and I work on something hard this week because we did have one task.
Okay. Okay. I thought this might happen. I sensed it that the pairing would be unfair, and I was right. So let me write this down. I did what Megan did. Thank you, Megan.
You sure you don't want this one?
I know, I'm good. I'm so good. That's all for
Stacey,
you.
I'm gonna miss working with you. I would love to work with you, but oh my goodness. Now I see like installing package math. I'm like, I need a little bit of a break.
So we have Nick. Also, just to say something else in support of you, Megan, I started doing what you were doing during your stream yesterday. I wrote NPM when I was using PNPM and got myself stuck. It was a whole thing.
Yeah, it's I gotta make a little chart.
So we have Nick and Stacy for this one. And again, please be noisy and ask questions if you hit something that doesn't make sense, or if you spend time and get stuck, please stop and wait for us to come help you rather than spending too much time on this. We don't want this to take up your entire week or anything like that. So then we have well, this is nice. Stacy and Shivak, you get to work again together on our Doorbell and Shivak, you get to work together on something rather than splitting up quite yet. That's nice. I can't type anybody's username. I'll go over this one real quick as well. This is basically just you ensuring the user doesn't enter duplicate items or items that are empty. This one should be a little easier, knock on wood, but again, please just ask us for help as soon as you feel like you might need help rather than spending too much time on it. And it is now 12:01. My time, I'm gonna stop here. Do we feel okay about going into this week
I do. Thank you so much, Nick, for switching. I think I had just a quick question about the demo. So as you notice, Sueksha and I did it a little bit differently because I remember Megan mentioned, I think it was Megan, I'm sorry if I'm forgetting, but how it was hard to read the screenshots. So just wondering if the way the presentation was structured is okay, or changes need to be made.
Yeah, I think it was me who brought that up. But yeah, it looked great. How did it feel? Because I know it can be a little scary to be like, oh, now we don't have the
Oh, it was
scaffolding of the
scary.
slides. Okay.
Scary, but I mean,
You did great.
you have to, try it, right? And I feel like everybody here is very kind. So even if I'm like stuck, someone will jump in and help out.
Yeah, for sure.
I mean, also your demos are great, all of you. I haven't seen a cohort ever be this serious about doing slides and like preparing something. So you're going out in history as one of the last teams and also one of the best teams as far as demos I've ever seen. So keep it up.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Of course. Any other questions?
So I know Nick and Stacy have a difficult task, and I would love to help if you guys need any help throughout the week.
Yeah. So one request I have of you all this week is please do more communication in public on Slack so we can see what you're talking about. Part of why we make those threads for you is so that we can go back and see what you're talking about on the issues you're working on. It's not just so that you can refer back to them, which is also, of course, because I forget where things are if they're not written down. But like, please use Slack to talk to each other as much as you feel comfortable. You can always, of course, have private discussions if there's something comes up that you think should be private, but please, please, please work in public as much as possible.
Mm-hmm.
And also in a way that writes things down so we have records of what happened. And so you can also take notes and learn something. And then also so we, your mentors, can go back over stuff and brag about you in blog posts and things like that. Any other questions, comments, criticisms, other feedback words I'm not thinking of?
Good luck to Nick and I forgot. Stacey?
Nick and Stacey,
Stacey?
yes.
Okay, good luck.
You forgetting, Jenny? No,
That's all right. I knew Nick switched. I wasn't sure if they were. Good luck. It's a fun one.
My suggestion, especially for Nick and Stacey this week, and also just in general going forward, spend half an hour trying stuff. And if you can't get somewhere productive within that half an hour, stop and ask for help, please. Don't like spin your wheels into the ground. Think of it as you being helpful to your teams by letting them know that something has gone awry in the planning phase, because it's not helpful to be a hero, at your job, you might be like, I have to prove myself that I can do this, but in fact, it helps everyone else to know that you need help, so that we can identify something wrong with our planning and with our estimation skills, and also so that we can all get unstuck, and so that no one is stuck relying on you. That won't happen here, but if you end up blocking something at work, that could be very inconvenient for someone else if they're like waiting on your feature and they didn't know you needed help the entire time, right? So there's no shame in asking for help as soon as possible.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I would say try just long enough so that you have, when you're asking for help in a Slack channel, you can be like, hey, I'm stuck on this. This is what I'm seeing. This is what I've tried so far. And then let somebody jump in to help you out.
Mm-hmm.
The one other thing that I also wanted to add, sort of tangent, different topic, is I wanted to apologize for getting in the PR reviews so late in the week. Was not our best. Next week, I'll make sure to like post a little reminder for the mentors earlier so that we can give you a little bit more time so you don't have to rush to address any feedback before this meeting.
Yes.
But thank you for your flexibility.
Thank you, Megan. Yeah, thank you, Megan, for taking on that. And also all of you for being patient with us.
Yes, thank you, Megan.
Also, though, if we give you feedback that would delay you significantly, it's not more important than getting the product to work. So you can always just say, thank you for your feedback. We'll take a note of this and do it later. We are not, we're not going to gatekeep you. As long as the feature works, live your best life. You should never feel the need to wait on us if we're like nitpicking you.
Oh, also, have you guys been posting in the channel when your peers are ready? You have.
I don't think I saw that this week.
Yeah,
No,
feel free
because
to
we-
just.
Oh,
Yeah, go ahead.
sorry. I was gonna say no, because we each get emails. So I think that as soon as you are added, so once it's mentors, did you receive a message once we added you?
Yeah, I think we get the emails. Feel free to post in the Slack channels as well. Just like tag us and ping us. Like,
Yeah.
no shame.
I'll be
in that,
honest with
like-
all of you. I don't read my emails. I don't. They're a hole that things fall into. It's not your fault. It's a me thing. But like my preference, if you don't mind, would be that you communicate as noisily in Slack as possible for as many things as
Yeah.
possible.
Same.
I don't mind
I
redundant
agree.
notifications.
Yeah, I agree. I think Slack is the way to go.
Okay.
Like doubling up on the communications just to give us a little bit of pressure publicly.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Publicly shame
Shame
us. Throw,
us.
throw, throw
Yeah,
tomatoes
shame
at us.
us.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. That's fine.
One more thing I'll say, if maybe you're not talking in Slack as much because you're worried about being annoying, you are not being annoying. We want to hear from you. We want to see the discussions you're having. We want to know how you're feeling, what you're working on. You can share random thoughts throughout the week. You can share what you learned in the week. You can talk about your pets. You say whatever you want. You don't have to like keep things to yourself if you want to share anything with us. Okay. Thank you all for your extra time. I'm gonna call it here. If you have any questions, please let us know as soon as possible. And we will see you on Tuesday.
Good. Thank
Bye,
you,
guys.
everyone.
Thank you.
Great job,
bye.
everybody.
Talk to you soon.